Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I'm kind of going a little off of just doing vehicles and everything else. Um, when we were first introduced to Cobra, it's a terrorist organization that's trying to take over the world. Um, and then later on, we have like G.I. Joe Renegades, and then we have Cobra, which is a corporation that's still trying to take over the world, but it's more of a corporate setting, and it's been kind of done that way a little bit more in recent years. Um, Destro be it was always alluded as being an arms dealer and all that, um, but it never really gets into all the different companies that Cobra may or may not be, and so on and so forth. So. I kind of took it upon myself because doing role playing games and all the other silliness that I do, if we're talking about Cobra as a corporation, um, how do we do this without it? It's nice and easy if you just put the Cobra name and say it's got this and that and everything else. But in the reality, if you want this to be a little challenging for a group to try and figure out who owns what, and you want the characters or your players as characters to try and figure things out, you know, uh, to say, well, this company belongs to here, but does that really go to Cobra or is it something else? And it just leads you to nowhere. Um, so I kind of came up with this. So we have like Cobra as Cobra Industries, right? So just playing with names. If any of these are similar to something in real life, it is not intended. Um, so I'm just saying that out, before we get started here. Um, so I figured, having different sub companies, so it gets murky and people don't understand who's got the money, where the money goes, and everything else. So, unfortunately, this first category, La Pointe management, comes from something real world that's kind of going on in a real world sense. I'm not trying to allude to it, but so we have like La Pointe Food Services, and they're getting government contracts now, whether it's for like schools or um, military bases or whatever have you, something in that regard. Okay. Um, but it looks like it's on paper as a regular business. Now it's a front business that's actually doing work, but here it's getting government contracts, and half that money or part of that money goes into funding Cobra. So um, one of the things that had been brought up in some of the other side videos that I've seen from other content creators, and they talk about how Cobra is always looking for ways to come up with money because trying to take over the world's an expensive thing, um, which I think is why in later iterations of GI Joe, Cobra is a corporation. Now, my view, and I do remember this in my lifetime, where there was a organization, and I don't remember the full specifics because I do remember I was younger at this, um, and I wasn't paying full attention at it, whatever. But um, there was an organization that was tied to some sort of terrorist group or something like that, and the government was able to just freeze all of their assets. So, um, one of the things that kind of sticks in my mind is if you have a corporation that makes this a little murky, um, and you don't keep everything in one pot, and it seems like you're doing legitimate business, but you're also doing other things on the side that people don't really see or understand, and yet you could be kind of right in someone's face, but they don't really see the dirty deeds you're really doing. So that's where I'm kind of going with this. So then we have LaPointe as hotel services. They own some hotel chains, something like that, but they're getting government contracts. So let's just say that, even if it's overseas, maybe they buy hotels overseas or something like that, or they own them overseas because they own multiple properties or whatever else, and they usually try to get it as government contracts. Something else taken from our real world situation, we have to house people for whatever the reason is. And let me just flat out say, we have refugees coming in for whatever reasons we do not agree. I don't know where everyone sits on this. I'm just throwing it out here. Um, and it's a corporation that's taking advantage and saying, hey, there's a need by the government and we're supplying it. And whether it's done in a good way of doing service or a poor way of doing service is whatever. Um, but they have hotel chains typically for government contracts. So, and then of course having securities, so they can have their own security firm in there. So by having security firms in there, it's also another reason why Cobra could have the ability to purchase weapons and stuff like that that you or I may not be able to typically have because they have government contracts. They may be able to get weapons that we don't typically have that access to. And then I threw this in here because, hey, if you're doing all this, why not have, say, like a credit union? So I'm throwing that in there too. So they could store their own money, they can do it legally, they can have other people get in there and then add their money into it, and then they, maybe they're, you know, bad banks, or maybe it's doing it perfectly legal and they're making plenty of money, but everything seems above board, but it's still funneling money somewhere. Okay. Um, and of course, I couldn't, I've seen this for years. Um, I could not help it. Cobra Insurance. Um, this is not meant to go for the actual real Cobra insurance that people do rely on. I'm just having fun with the name. So this is a little bit more blatant, but it is not meant to bash what is an actual legal company. But you have to admit, it just sounds like it should fit, doesn't it? Um, I just couldn't resist it. I'm sorry. Okay, if they're doing insurance, why not have Cobra Medical Systems doing pharmaceuticals? Um, so this is where maybe Dr. Mindbender would come in, stuff like that. Um, if you want to say Zartan, because every so often we have I think Zartan had come up with the shoot. Now I can't think of the name of them. Where essentially they could clone people, but it was done out of a gel kind of thing or whatever. I cannot think of what it's called, and I know I just saw an episode where they were talking about it. But, anyways, you know, all that could be done under the Cobra Medical Systems pharmaceutical, and then we have Cobra Plex, so a flexible plastic kind of corporation that has some subdivisions. So they do medical wrapping of whatever they need, Plex wrap, like food or your general, we got to make plastic wrap for anything, and then Plex form. So um, I figured this could do two things. First of all, they could have one division um, trying to help come up with a plastic form for some of their vehicles or some of their other things, as well as doing silly, just mundane things, whether it's, think of things that are plastic, like you have chair, uh, like arms for, like, office chairs, um, whatever, anything like that. And there again, it's something else that people could rely on to do legitimate business, but it's also something that's funneling money. So it becomes a big conglomerate. And because now it's all divided up, even as Cobra Plex being the corporate overlord of it, you know, maybe a lot of people just see it as Plex Med, Plex Wrap, Plex Form, and that's all they know it as. So they don't even think of it as Cobra, it's something else. So just throwing that out here. And then we have Extensive Enterprises, or Enterprise, which is from the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Zaymont. Now, because it's been brought up about the Red Rocket, so we have to throw the Red Rocket in here. So that might be under their umbrella. And then the S Mart. And then I kind of came up with a Viper Transportation. So here's a transportation company. And because it's the Crimson Twins, we have Twin V, Twin Viper, warehousing. And then we have Mercy Care Hospitals. Um, Figuring that, hey, if they have legitimate businesses just like the other ones, people don't think as much about it, whatever. And I figured Extensive Savings Bank, because I know that in the cartoons they had done different banking things or whatever else. Makes sense. And then Quick Bite, kind of a play on like snakes. Quick Bite gas stations. Um, so it goes from here. Now, von Stromberg Corporation, now this would be the Baroness. Her last name, or it's, Anna von Stromberg. So von Stromberg being the last name, uh, her corporation just here. I figured she had always been an intelligence person, so Strom Tech. So of course, then they have Strom Games, Strom Bio. So the Strom Bio would be for like medical stuff like that, and then Strom Engineering. So if that's coming up for some of their um, technical expertise that they need for flight controls for the Mars, uh, whether it's the tanks or for planes or some of the other things that they're doing, Strom Engineering might be able to be a part of that, so they can keep that money inside and help each other out, but it's also doing other things as well. And then we finally get down to old Destro himself with Mars Industries. So we have McCullen Motors, so he can make his tanks and stuff like that. I figured Magnum Arms, something a different name. That way it doesn't seem like it's tied directly to Destro himself. Then we have Cullen Fuel Stations and Cullen Oil. Um, and then McCullen Construction. Um, that way, if there's whatever construction company or whatever that they need, it kind of ties everything. Everything is there to kind of help each other, but it's all divided up. Um, if you have one corporation that owns everything, suddenly it seems like there's monopoly laws that start coming into the way things are or whatever. But if you divide this all up, so here's Destro for this, we have the Baroness for that part, the Crimson Twins doing this part, and then Cobra itself doing the other. It divides it up. It looks like it is completely different, and yeah, they kind of are different, but they're all going for the same goal. And the fact that even if one of them got found out and kind of shut down, they have other ones to kind of scratch each other's back, and then they've all been feeding into some other pot somewhere else. Um, let's see. Yes, we do have the Extensive Savings Bank, as well as having the LaPointe Credit Union. Um, Even if we were to say that, like the Baroness and her group um, had their own bank, as well as Destro having his bank as well, so they could have different banks, and even if it seems like they're competing rates or whatever, and some people might say, even if they're all run almost identical, just different names, sometimes you have people that say, I just don't like that one, but I like this one over here, and they're all getting the money. So here we have just different corporations to throw out here, something else, and it also adds that sense of mystery in there. Um, so that way, if we were to run this as a role playing game, um, it doesn't just flat out say everything is Cobra, kind of like in Renegades, where it seems like they was it the Cobra Industries or whatever just runs everything. Um, Here it breaks it all up, and it just seems like there are different companies out there. You can put in the mundane stuff depending on where you live. So if it's an Audi corporation right next to McCullen Motors, um, who knows? Um, or here in the states, maybe it's Ford or Chevy or Ford, Chevy, or Dodge, uh, and then McCullen's right next to it or something. Who knows? However you want to run it, wherever you are in the world that this really screams out. This says, hey, this would be wonderful. I know most of my viewers, I believe, are here in the United States, but for those that are outside of the United States and are seeing this, take what works for you in your area. Um, why not have fun with it? Uh, because as I'm presenting this stuff as something to do in a role playing game, even if you were to take this idea and throw it into um, the GI Joe role playing game that's already out there, and not the D6, which I'm converting the stuff into, go ahead, have fun with it. This is all open. I'm not trying to do I do this stuff for fun. This just things that pop into my head uh, because I love doing role playing games, and I love you know having a great love for like the GI Joe, the Transformers, the Star Wars. These are things from me growing up and just always stayed with me as just fun things to have fun with. So that's what this is all about. Hopefully, this gives ideas to those that are out there playing role playing games and bringing it into your own role playing game, or ideas for some other type of whatever you're doing. Um, and hopefully, it's useful. With that, hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you in the next video.